And here we are. It looks like we are officially live. I'm going to just sort of welcome people for the next little bit as it connects to all of these social media platforms. So far, so good. If anybody is watching out there, by all means, throw something into the chat. Let us know that you are out there. We are here celebrating the Ontario Trillium Foundation's grant for oneROOF. I have to tell you, as a member of provincial parliament, soon to be a former member of provincial parliament, but that is a whole other live stream. When I have these opportunities to celebrate the organizations in our community that are receiving funding, they just swell my little heart, because it's organizations like oneROOF that are holding the most vulnerable in our community. And oftentimes they aren't seen and recognized in the work that they're doing for people, and the stories that they hold about what folks are going through in our communities. They rest with these organizations. So these OTF recognition grants are absolutely phenomenal for me as a member, and for many of my colleagues across the province who have the honor of being with community to celebrate these grants. So before we jump in, I just want to begin well, as they say. And I want to note that I am actually in my office in Kitchener Centre, and this land has been held down, cared for, loved, and stewarded by the Haudenosaunee, the Anishinaabe, and the Nisga'a people. We are on the Haldeman Tract. And what I've always been taught is that I've been taught that the land acknowledgement, the acknowledgement of the land that you're on, the treaties that you are a part of, is the easy part. You can Google that. You can figure out what land you're on, no matter where you are traveling across the globe. But the work of a land acknowledgement can be so much more. And one way that you can do that is to make a concrete connection between the reality that you are having a conversation, or hosting, in this case, me hosting a conversation on stolen land, and the topic of the conversation that we're about to engage with. And so for me, when I was thinking about hosting this conversation right here on the Haldeman Tract in Kitchener Centre, the big connection for me was pretty simple. When we work for the most vulnerable, literally everybody else in community thrives. When the Truth and Reconciliation Commission report came out, and 96 calls to action were put in before many of us that were either settled on this land or settlers on the land, we were given a gift. We were given a gift to do better. We were given a gift to actually find ways to hold people with love, care, and compassion. And by doing that, we make up for a history that didn't do that. We've become a community that actually does center the people that need us most. Indigenous community members are disproportionately impacted by things like homelessness, by things like the lack of mental health supports that we have available, especially culturally responsive mental health supports. And so when we're having this conversation, I want us to actually take seriously that reality, because if we are fighting for housing for young people, if we're fighting for youth that are experiencing homelessness, mental health, and addictions, that are navigating being street involved over the course of their lives as they're growing, then we've got to make sure that we are seeing them for the totality of who they are. And we can't do that if we start to say, okay, today we're going to do a little bit of work with some Indigenous community members, but tomorrow we're going to only focus on young people, as though you can't be young and Indigenous simultaneously. And so it is that's my starting point for me to welcome all of you who are watching. Thank you again for tuning in. And also to celebrate an Ontario Trillium Foundation grant that was received by oneROOF. So I'm joined today by Sandy Deitrich Bell, who you may have seen in other live streams with me, because that is how we roll. And so we have Sandy with us, and we also have John Issa, who's here, who is from the Canadian Observatory on Homelessness. And my goal really is to just take a moment in celebrating the grant received to talk about why receiving that grant was so important, and why this investment from the province to an organization like oneROOF is so critical to building better communities. So Sandy, over to you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Yeah, so we were thrilled to receive $150,000 from OTF in 2022. And it was really sort of on the heels of COVID and trying to recover from, the funding not coming in and programs having to, really be piecemeal together with all the COVID restrictions and whatnot. It gave us an opportunity to sit back and sort of reflect on OneRoof as an agency. And one of the really predominant things we were recognizing is the extreme mental health concerns that the population that we support are experiencing. So whether it's linked to substance use, or whether it's from violence or trauma in their home life, or their time on the street, the mental health issue was so prevalent. And so when I initially wrote this grant to OTF, the goal was sort of twofold. We wanted to really have the funds available to hire the Canadian Observatory on Homelessness to do sort of a 360 review and evaluation of us as an agency, to make sure that we move forward in relevance, that we continue to hear the voices of the young people, that our programming is what is necessary, that it gives us some insight into looking forward and being prepared for what's coming instead of always being reactive. And then also to hire some mental health and addictions staff to work directly with those who are experiencing crisis, or the feeling the effects of whatever mental health concern they're dealing with. And so we were fortunate to be given the grant. We hired the Canadian Observatory on Homelessness right away, and we hired staff right away, and the staff were kept extremely busy. It's does my heart good to truly be able to attribute at least 15 lives saved to the mental health workers being on site in the moment when someone was in crisis, and being able to be right there, to walk along with them in that crisis. And then sort of on the side, while the mental health and addiction program was happening, we were working closely with John and his team to give them a sense of what we do and what we have done and where we would like to go. And I'll let John explain sort of the process that his team went through to give us this evaluation, and the recommendations that came from it. But I just want to say that it was so instrumental for us to have this evaluation in hand, because we were coming to the end of our 5-year strategic plan. And so this evaluation literally fed the strategic plan moving forward for the next 5 years. And so we, myself, my staff, and the board of directors are so confident that we're on the right path for the next 5 years with this strat plan, because of the revelations that came out of this sort of 360 evaluation. And I will say that, it's a little daunting to give yourself over to, OneRoof is my baby. I've been here 18 years, and to hand it over to a group and have them evaluate it was a little daunting for me. I'm like, be kind. I only want to hear good things. No, that's not true. I really wanted the truth, so that we could, continue to do good work, but also pick up where we're lacking. I don't pretend to say that we're doing everything right. And so it was really good to hear from the evaluation some areas that we need to work on, and some things we're doing well, and ways in which we need to proceed. So really thrilled, and so thankful to OTF for giving us that opportunity to do some agency reflection. And then John, I'll just hand it over to you and let you sort of speak to your research modality and the findings.
Before we hand it to you, John, I just want to pick up on something that Sandy said. Actually, two things, maybe three, but the first one, you said it was so important in this review to move forward in relevance. I just want to say that again for the people in the back, because when the province invests in organizations so that they can remain relevant as they are fighting particular crises, that is so important. And I sometimes think that there's a bit of a disconnect that people have between research that happens that does in fact help you to stay relevant when you are open to hearing the truth about what's working and what's not, and the need for these kinds of investments to do that work. And so I just wanted to say that, just reiterate that, because using provincial investment for something like that is literally critical. It does actually allow you to hold people with the care and compassion that they need. And for that, I am so very grateful that you were courageous enough to actually say, okay, it's time to just take a deep breath and hand it over to John. So thank you, John, for joining us, and over to you.
Perfect. Thank you both, Laura and Sandy. So I'm John. I'm the Director of Research and Evaluation at the Canadian Observatory on Homelessness. And as Sandy mentioned, through the funding provided by the Ontario Trillium Foundation, our team at the Canadian Observatory on Homelessness was able to conduct an evaluation of oneROOF's services to identify successes, areas for growth, and to recommend future steps. Our evaluation helped to show how oneROOF programs and services are working to prevent youth homelessness in the region of Waterloo, the communication and partnership mechanisms in place to coordinate services across oneROOF, and young people's uptake of the array of services that oneROOF offers. So we spoke with program staff and young people to understand their experiences at oneROOF. We also reviewed program manuals and agency policies. We found that young people are satisfied with the programs and services offered by oneROOF. The ability of oneROOF to provide integrated and centralized on-site services was a major strength. We heard that oneROOF has supported positive changes in the lives of many young people, helping them to access resources, recover from problematic substance use, see improvements in their physical and mental health, support their transition into independent living, reunite with families, improve their relationships, acquire skills, and also gain the skills to secure employment in the community. Although oneROOF staff do their best, it was acknowledged that without secure, longer-term funding, they could only do so much. With the impact of the toxic drug supply, the lack of affordable housing, and the need for more accessible mental health supports, oneROOF is often faced with picking up the pieces from the failures of other systems. Specifically, we heard that oneROOF could benefit from women-specific emergency shelter spots so that young women have a safe place to go. And we also heard that there's a greater need for youth-centric mental health and addiction supports for all young people at oneROOF. As I said earlier, these would both require greater and sustained financial investment. So our evaluation helped oneROOF to identify areas to sustain and areas to enhance in order to support young people experiencing homelessness in the region of Waterloo. It was a collaborative process that culminated in a roadmap for oneROOF to direct its services in the future. So it's a great experience. It's always a great opportunity to collaborate with community partners and get to know the context, and oneROOF is one of these really great agencies that we've been fortunate to work with. So just thank you again to the Ontario Trillium Foundation for providing the opportunity to conduct this important work.
Thank you so much for that, John. There's three things that I want to pull out of what we have heard today, because when we get Ontario Trillium Foundation funding, what I have heard fairly consistently is that funding helps to address part of a gap, but it's long-term sustained funding that people need. And so I am so very grateful to the Ontario Trillium Foundation for selecting an organization like oneROOF to provide some of that sort of stopgap funding. And I hope that when they see and hear about these successes and the things that are now needed as a consequence of recognizing the organization, that the government is ready to provide that sustainable funding. When we do that, we end up being proactive rather than reactive, which was something that both Sandy and John have alluded to. When we start to get a good sense of the kinds of problems and issues and challenges that young people are facing on their day-to-day. And we know for a fact that throughout the pandemic, a lot of those were like dramatically increased, sort of feeling like out of nowhere. So those that were most vulnerable were feeling it even more. And many people are now joining within that need for youth-centered mental health and addiction services. Then we know that we have to start asking for the sustainable funding. And so I do want to thank you for being very honest and open about that, because those are the kinds of things that we as community, as we celebrate, can start asking for. The long-term investments and making sure that this is sustainable. I also want to give a shout out to the staff at OneRoof and the other staff in community that are doing this kind of work. What you are holding is difficult. Like, you're holding the burden of holding somebody's story is real. And there is, when the systems don't provide adequate funding for you to be able to do exactly what you know you are supposed to do or need to do for people, you hold that and you carry that with you. And I just want folks that are doing this work to know that I see that. And no matter where I am, I will keep fighting for that kind of long-term investment, because we need it. I can tell you, well before OneRoof was receiving this grant, we were hearing from young people in our neighborhood that needed this kind of investment. And we know that the wait lists for mental health in general are very long. The wait lists for young people seeking mental health services are even longer. If you add other kinds of intersecting realities of people's identity, which is also something that John pointed to, the list gets longer and longer and longer. And we need to become a community that recognizes that, yes, we can celebrate these amazing wins when OTF recognizes this, and we can also ask for OTF to take back with them what these successes are and ask for more, right? Because we need to be able to do more. We need that sustainable funding. The very last thing that I will say before I let everybody go again is congratulations. Congratulations to you, Sandy, for all of your advocacy. By being focused and diligent and open and loving as a leader in this community, that is what allowed for this funding to come your way. And so thank you. Keep doing you. Thank you, John, for taking the time to work with OneRoof and for providing this kind of feedback to them, because that's making our community better and stronger. And a lot of the information that you give to an organization like OneRoof in our community translates to other organizations across the country. So for that, I'm also very, very grateful for that work. And I can't help it. I have to do a shout out to Steve Gates, because I do think that that's important. Once upon a time, many, many moons ago, but not too many moons, because I'm still young at heart, I actually worked with Steve on some work that he was doing when he was navigating the throes of trying to address homelessness. That was back then. Now we have a bigger problem. And just recently, I think in the paper, they were talking about the fentanyl crisis yet again. The access to safe supply is something that is really, really important for us to start thinking about. Making sure that people have access to what they need when they need it is deeply important. And so I'm just very grateful for OTF seeing value in this kind of work. So with that, my friends, thank you all for tuning in. Do spread the word. Let people know that this is the kind of stuff that we want the province to invest in. And let's hope that the next time that I'm on a live stream with John and Sandy, we're saying that they have the sustainable funding that they need. Thank you, everyone. Have a good one.
Thank you, Laura May. Bye, everyone.